The telephone call arrived at precisely 7:45 on a crisp Tuesday morning, 6 months and 8 days after the executive board restructured my position at Paragon Steel Manufacturing. The voice on the line belonged to Klaus Hoffmann, a senior compliance auditor with Eisen Metal Group, speaking with a measured German cadence that admitted no compromise. He asked if I was available to discuss a severe regulatory failure identified in Paragon Steel's federal compliance records. I sat at my wooden desk in a quiet second-floor office situated above Seamus O'Malley's pub on Liberty Avenue, taking a slow sip of black coffee as morning sunlight cut through the Pittsburgh fog over the old steel mills across the river. 6 months earlier, I had served as Paragon's primary compliance officer. Now, I was listening to the opening tremors of a $340 million corporate collapse. My name is Grant Miller, 50 years old, and I spent 12 years ensuring heavy industrial manufacturing operations remained fully compliant with federal law. Before transitioning to commercial manufacturing, I spent 18 years serving in the United States Army Corps of Engineers, inspecting structural dams and military bridges. Structural engineering and corporate compliance operate on identical principles. When a concrete support fails in civil engineering, physical infrastructure collapses. When regulatory compliance breaks in heavy manufacturing, billion-dollar corporations dissolve overnight. The chain of events leading to this reckoning began on another Tuesday morning inside Paragon's glass-walled executive conference room. Brandon Vance, the 29-year-old nephew of Chief Executive Officer George Vance, strutted into our quarterly operational meeting carrying a customized laptop and an expensive organic green smoothie. Brandon had recently been appointed Vice President of Digital Optimization despite having zero background in industrial operations or federal safety mandates. He carried the unearned arrogance typical of individuals who had never managed a real crisis or answered for a costly failure. He did not shake hands with department heads. He waved two fingers dismissively, spoke in trendy buzzwords like disruptive synergy and lean operational agility, and treated 40-year industry veterans like temporary obstacles. Without prior announcement on the agenda, Brandon projected a slide deck titled Streamlining Legacy Support Functions. Phase 1 of his strategy involved gutting my compliance oversight department. I had served as Paragon's designated primary compliance officer under federal safety and environmental statutes for 12 consecutive years. Over that decade, I established our safety protocols from the ground up, navigated complex statutory updates, and guided the facility through 5 comprehensive federal audits with 0 violations. My physical archive cabinets were structured with military precision, every permit cross-referenced, cataloged, and signed according to federal standards. Brandon did not even understand basic regulatory terminology. During the presentation, I watched him secretly search for statutory definitions on his mobile device, while claiming that corporate oversight could be fully automated using unverified software algorithms. Brandon stood at the head of the boardroom table, gesturing with his uncle's corporate credit card, and declared my oversight team an obsolete financial burden. He claimed my department represented legacy friction that hampered operational speed. He displayed a financial breakdown showing my $88,000 annual salaries, plus $14,000 in health benefits, proudly announcing that eliminating my position would instantly produce $102,000 in annual overhead savings. Someone at the far end of the executive table actually applauded his presentation. I did not react emotionally. I simply capped my pen, closed my notepad, and asked if the presentation was concluded. Brandon offered a patronizing nod and departed to file his cost reduction spreadsheet. I returned to my office and pulled a fresh binder from the shelf. My reaction was driven by decades of military protocol rather than personal resentment. When an officer observes leadership heading directly toward a structural hazard, standard procedure demands documenting every detail for damage containment. I initiated a complete archive backup of every digital credential, regulatory filing, and legal authorization bearing my official signature as the primary designated authority. The executive board failed to comprehend that Paragon's entire federal operating framework was legally anchored to my individual certification. Under federal environmental regulations and Occupational Safety and Health Administration mandates, every quarterly submission and safety affidavit required a designated primary officer registered with federal authorities. No replacement could take office without a formal board resolution and regulatory notification filed within 21 calendar days. Brandon was oblivious to these legal requirements, and George Vance had signed off on his nephew's proposal without reading the underlying statutory obligations. 4 days later, Human Resources delivered formal reclassification paperwork, reducing my title to administrative coordinator and removing my executive credentials. I accepted the notification without protest and politely congratulated Brandon on reaching his initial budget target. That evening, I retrieved the original board resolution from 2019 that established my official regulatory designation. I scanned the document, transmitted a time-stamped copy to my private digital storage, and printed 2 physical duplicates. One copy went into my home safe. The second copy was placed inside a gray binder clearly labeled Regulatory Continuity, Archive Only, which I stored on the 4th shelf of the legal department storage vault. I remained silent because true consequences do not require loud declarations. The crucial element rested within Section 12.3 of Paragon's Internal Governance Charter, a regulatory handoff clause I had drafted 4 years earlier following a major federal enforcement action against a regional competitor. The clause explicitly mandated that any vacancy in the designated compliance officer position must be formally reassigned by official board resolution within 21 calendar days, or the corporation's federal regulatory standing would become legally invalid retroactive to the vacancy date. Under federal manufacturing standards, continuous non-compliance penalties start at $10,000 per day, escalating to $30,000 per day after 90 days of uncorrected violations. 6 weeks following my demotion, I submitted a concise resignation letter giving 2 weeks' notice. Leaving Paragon to face its self-inflicted deadline, my departure from Paragon Steel Manufacturing was executed with absolute quietness. There were no emotional exit interviews, no celebratory retirement gatherings, and no company-wide announcements. The Human Resources Department processed my separation paperwork as a routine administrative exit, revoking my building access codes by the end of the afternoon. In their rush to finalize the paperwork, the junior clerk misspelled my surname on the final release form and neglected to transmit the mandatory departures notification to the Federal Regulatory Registry. They believed they had successfully eliminated $102,000 in redundant corporate overhead. In reality, they had initiated a countdown timer on a regulatory landmine that was ticking silently in the background. That evening, my son Wyatt called to check on how the transition was progressing. Wyatt was a junior studying mechanical engineering at Carnegie Mellon University, a sharp young man who inherited my methodical work ethic and analytical mindset. He expressed reasonable concern regarding his upcoming tuition payments for the spring semester. I reassured him that my financial planning was fully secure and that my departure was part of a carefully calculated professional transition. I explained to him that 18 years in the Army Corps of Engineers had taught me to build redundant contingency frameworks long before structural pressures begin to emerge. He laughed softly over the telephone line, recognizing that his father never took decisive action without having established a clear operational objective and an emergency exit strategy. Over the weekend, I accessed the federal regulatory database and updated my official professional profile. I changed my designated role from active corporate officer to relinquished independent consultant, leaving the corporate officer designation line entirely blank, as required by federal law when no formal successor has been named by board resolution. I then formally registered Miller Compliance Consulting, an independent enterprise specializing in emergency regulatory recovery, legal risk assessment, and industrial audit defense. Within 24 hours of updating my status on the Federal Registry, my phone began ringing with inquiries from industrial manufacturing firms seeking expert guidance to resolve complex compliance challenges. I rented a comfortable 2-room office space on the 2nd floor above Seamus O'Malley's pub on Liberty Avenue. The office contained two solid oak writing desks, a traditional steel filing cabinet system, a reliable drip coffee brewer, and a clear view of the old steel mills along the riverfront. The monthly rent was $1,200, while my new independent consulting rate was established at $350 per hour. The financial realities of independent private practice quickly proved far superior to my former corporate salary. Every morning at 7 o'clock, I walked downstairs to grab fresh black coffee from Mimas, a veteran tavern proprietor who had operated the establishment for 35 years. Seamus understood the quiet rhythm of industrial work and deeply respected individuals who operated with discipline. During our morning conversations, Seamus frequently shared practical observations gathered from decades of serving steelworkers, plant supervisors, and corporate managers. He noted that ambitious young executives frequently attempted to dismantle established operational structures without taking the time to understand why those systems had been constructed in the first place. His insights perfectly mirrored the exact situation developing across town at Paragon Steel. While Brandon Vance celebrated his perceived cost-cutting victories in executive meetings, Paragon was operating on borrowed time as the statutory 21-day grace period expired without a board resolution designating a replacement compliance officer. On day 22 following my resignation, Paragon entered active federal non-compliance status because no qualified individual had been designated to assume official regulatory authority. Every safety log, environmental filing, and operational affidavit submitted by Paragon became legally void retroactive to my departure date. The initial statutory fine of $10,000 per day began accumulating silently in federal databases. Unaware of this compounding financial exposure, Brandon proceeded enthusiastically with Phase 2 of his operational restructuring, reducing physical safety inspection schedules and replacing hands-on compliance checks with verified software's dashboard that reported green status regardless of actual plant conditions. Meanwhile, my independent consulting practice expanded rapidly across the region. On day 43 of Paragon's violation period, I secured a major consulting contract with an industrial alloy fabricator in Ohio that was facing an imminent federal inspection following the sudden resignation of their lead auditor. Working at $350 per hour, I reconstructed their compliance documentation trail within 3 weeks, resolving their regulatory vulnerabilities and saving them from severe statutory fines. On day 67, I flew to Texas to assist an enterprise processing plant in resolving an environmental investigation, utilizing strict military documentation standards to demonstrate full regulatory compliance. Back in Pittsburgh, Wyatt visited my office on day 95 to share encouraging personal news. Inspired by our discussions regarding corporate governance and regulatory enforcement, he had decided to enroll in Carnegie Mellon's graduate program in industrial compliance engineering. He noted that international manufacturing conglomerates acquiring domestic industrial assets were creating immense demand for specialists who understood both operational engineering and federal statutory requirements. His observation reflected the broader economic transformation occurring throughout the industrial sector. As day 90 arrived at Paragon, the statutory penalty structure shifted into its secondary tier. Under federal regulations, uncorrected compliance violations persisting beyond 90 days automatically escalate from $10,000 per day to $30,000 per day. The daily financial penalty was now accumulating at an alarming rate, yet George Vance and Brandon Vance remained completely oblivious to the compounding liability. They continued preparing marketing presentations for potential international buyers, advertising Paragon as a lean, highly profitable manufacturing enterprise ready for acquisition. On day 120 following my departure, Paragon Steel Manufacturing issued a major press release that dominated the financial news across Pennsylvania. The announcement declared that Eisen Metal Group, a massive European industrial conglomerate, had entered into a definitive agreement to acquire Paragon for $340 million. The Pittsburgh Business Times featured a front-page article highlighting the transaction. featuring prominent quotes from Chief Executive Officer George Vance regarding Paragon's remarkable operational modernization. Brandon Vance was also quoted extensively, taking personal credit for streamlining legacy support functions and eliminating unnecessary administrative overhead to attract international investment. I read the news coverage over morning coffee at Seamus O'Malley's pub. Seamus looked over my shoulder at the newspaper photograph of Brandon smiling beside corporate acquisition graphics and remarked that arrogance usually reaches its peak right before a fall. I agreed with his assessment. Brandon had publicly celebrated the elimination of my department as the catalyst for Paragon's increased profitability, unaware that he had documented his own corporate negligence in public media filings. He had convinced himself that compliance was merely an arbitrary collection of paperwork rather than the legal framework that permitted the plant to operate legally under federal environmental and labor statutes. The acquisition agreement initiated an intensive due diligence period, during which Eisen Metal Group dispatched a specialized auditing team to Pittsburgh to verify Paragon's operational, financial, and legal standing. The auditing delegation was led by Dr. Ingrid Weber, a highly respected corporate officer known for her uncompromising thoroughness, and Klaus Hoffmann, a veteran compliance auditor with 22 years of experience evaluating industrial acquisitions across North America. The German auditing team established an operational base inside Paragon's corporate headquarters, initiating a systematic examination of facility records, maintenance histories, environmental filings, and regulatory permits. During the initial 2 weeks of due diligence, Brandon presented polished digital summaries and automated dashboard metrics, assuring the buyers that Paragon operated with maximum efficiency and zero operational friction. The financial spreadsheets appeared flawless, and the projected profit margins met Eisen Metal Group's acquisition criteria. George Vance hosted executive dinners at private clubs to celebrate the pending transaction, expressing complete confidence that the sale would close within 30 days. Legal counsel for both corporations began drafting final transfer documents, preparing to execute the $340 million transaction. However, experienced compliance auditors do not rely on digital summaries or executive promises. Klaus Hoffmann was a meticulous professional who believed in inspecting physical paper trails and original board resolutions. On day 142 of Paragon's ongoing compliance violation, Klaus conducted a thorough physical audit of Paragon's legal storage vaults to verify historical regulatory continuity filings and physical permit documentation. While cross-referencing statutory permits with official board minutes from previous years, Klaus discovered a troubling pattern. Recent quarterly regulatory filings submitted to federal agencies lacked valid executive certification stamps from a designated corporate officer. Proceeding to the fourth shelf on the left side of the legal archive vault, Klaus located the gray binder labeled Regulatory Continuity Archive, only that I had left 6 months prior. Klaus opened the binder and carefully reviewed the contents. Inside, he discovered the original 2019 board resolution, appointing Grant Miller as compliance officer, complete copies of federal regulatory statutes, and a highlighted copy of Section 12.3 of Paragon's internal governance charter. Klaus immediately recognized the severe legal implications of what he was reading. He cross-referenced my documented departure date with federal registry records and confirmed that no replacement officer had ever been designated by board resolution. Klaus executed a precise statutory calculation of Paragon's accumulated financial exposure. The statutory grace period of 21 calendar days had expired on day 22. From day 22 through day 90, spanning 68 days of initial violation at $10,000 per day, Paragon accrued $680,000 in statutory fines. From day 91 through day 142, spanning 52 days of escalated violation at $30,000 per day, Paragon accrued an additional $1,560,000. The total direct statutory fine stood at $2,240,000 and was increasing by $30,000 every 24 hours. More critically, Klaus recognized that, because no valid compliance authority existed for 142 days, every safety certificate, environmental affidavit, and operational report submitted to federal agencies and potential buyers during that period was legally invalid. Under federal corporate law, environmental protection statutes, and securities regulations, submitting invalid regulatory affidavits during acquisition negotiations constituted severe material misrepresentation. Paragon had effectively been operating as an unauthorized industrial entity for nearly 5 months, while presenting itself as a fully compliant enterprise to international investors. Klaus immediately compiled his findings into a confidential audit dossier, attached copies of Section 12.3, and requested an emergency morning session with Dr. Ingrid Weber and Paragon's executive board. Standing in the quiet corridor outside the executive suite, Klaus Hoffmann reviewed the calculations once more to ensure absolute mathematical precision. In industrial compliance auditing, there is no room for approximation. Every day of unauthorized operation carries explicit statutory weight, and every uncertified filing represents an unmitigated liability. Klaus knew that European industrial conglomerates operate under strict regulatory compliance frameworks, where board members face personal liability for acquiring non-compliant foreign assets. As he placed the red dossier into his briefcase, he realized that Brandon Vance's boastful cost-cutting initiative had created a legal nightmare that would completely dismantle the proposed acquisition before the final signatures could be executed. At precisely 9:15 on Thursday morning, the executive board of Paragon Steel Manufacturing assembled in the main conference room for what George Vance anticipated would be a routine due diligence update. Instead, Dr. Ingrid Weber and Klaus Hoffmann entered the room with cold professional distance, carrying thick audit binders. Klaus walked directly to the head of the conference table, placed a dark red folder in front of George Vance, and posed a quiet question that halted all conversation in the room. "Who is Grant Miller?" Brandon Vance chuckled nervously and attempted to dismiss the inquiry, explaining that Grant Miller was a former administrative employee whose position had been restructured during previous cost reduction initiatives. Klaus did not smile. He opened his binder and informed the assembly that, according to federal regulatory registries, Grant Miller remained the sole designated authority of record for Paragon's industrial permits. He noted that federal law mandated explicit board resolutions to transfer compliance authority, demanding to inspect the formal documentation, reassigning my responsibilities following my departure. An uncomfortable silence descended upon the boardroom. George Vance turned to his legal counsel, who looked bewildered and began shuffling frantically through corporate files. Brandon pulled out his tablet, attempting to locate an electronic confirmation that did not exist. A junior human resources representative admitted softly that the company had assumed the compliance designation transferred automatically when my job title was modified. Klaus shook his head with firm disapproval, stating that federal compliance designations never transfer automatically and require formal corporate action within 21 calendar days. Klaus then presented his statutory audit findings on the projection screen. He documented that Paragon had operated without valid regulatory authority for exactly 142 days, spanning 6 full reporting cycles. He displayed the precise financial penalty calculations, showing $2,240,000 in accrued statutory fines, escalating by $30,000 each day the position remained vacant. Furthermore, he demonstrated that every environmental permit, worker safety affidavit, and operational log executed during those 5 months was legally void under federal law. Dr. Ingrid Weber stood up and addressed the board with severe authority. She declared that Paragon had engaged in material misrepresentation of its regulatory standing throughout acquisition proceedings. Brandon attempted to salvage the deal, insisting that the matter was a minor administrative oversight that could be rectified immediately by rehiring Grant Miller and filing updated paperwork. Dr. Weber rejected his suggestion instantly, explaining that federal compliance violations cannot be retroactively erased through late filings. She stated that Paragon's failure to maintain proper governance created massive legal liabilities that no prudent buyer would accept. Brandon's composure completely dissolved as he realized the magnitude of his error. He argued that the archived governance binder was an obscure internal document that no one was expected to track. Klaus responded calmly that the binder had been properly cataloged and placed in the legal archive by an officer who followed standard regulatory protocol, whereas Paragon's executive leadership had demonstrated gross negligence by ignoring its own corporate charter. Dr. Weber formally announced that Eisen Metal Group was suspending all acquisition proceedings pending a complete legal investigation. George Vance sat motionless in his leather chair, his face pale as he processed the collapse of the $340 million transaction. Brandon began shouting at the corporate legal team, demanding to know why no one had monitored the statutory handoff timelines, but the attorneys remained silent, knowing that executive management had deliberately bypassed compliance oversight to showcase immediate cost savings. By noon, news of the suspended transaction leaked to corporate legal circles, initiating intense speculation throughout the industrial sector. The atmosphere inside Paragon's headquarters degenerated into panic as department heads realized that their operational permits were legally void. Corporate counsel advised the board that continuing manufacturing operations without valid statutory authorization exposed board members to personal liability under federal environmental enforcement laws. Emergency executive sessions were convened, but no internal attorney could manufacture a solution that satisfied federal regulatory requirements without exposing the company to massive legal penalties. Every legal option was evaluated, but the hard truth remained inescapable. Without valid historical filings signed by an authorized officer, Paragon's entire operational history for the past 5 months was legally compromised. Furthermore, Paragon's corporate insurer dispatched a formal notice indicating that operating without a designated compliance officer breached their commercial liability policy terms, threatening to cancel all coverage effective immediately. This development created immense legal jeopardy for the board members, who realized they were personally vulnerable to shareholder lawsuits for breach of fiduciary duty. Brandon's attempt to present himself as a modern efficiency expert had exposed the entire executive team to financial ruin. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, my office telephone rang. It was Klaus Hoffman calling to discuss the regulatory timeline. Klaus explained that Eisen Metal Group was conducting a formal review of Paragon's compliance history and requested my independent verification regarding departure dates and handoff protocols. I confirmed the timeline accurately and directed him to Section 12.3 of the governance charter in the legal storage vault. Klaus expressed deep respect for my thorough documentation, noting that my adherence to professional standards had protected the acquiring entity from absorbing millions of dollars in undisclosed liabilities. Before concluding the call, Klaus asked if Miller Compliance Consulting would be available for an executive retainer contract with Eisen Metal Group to audit their broader industrial operations across North America, offering an initial retainer that far exceeded my former corporate salary. On Friday morning, Eisen Metal Group issued a formal public statement terminating the acquisition agreement with Paragon Steel Manufacturing, citing unresolvable regulatory compliance, failures, and material misrepresentation of corporate standing. The public announcement sent shockwaves through the financial markets. When trading opened on the stock exchange, Paragon's equity valuation plummeted 42% within 90 minutes. Business publications across the country published detailed analyses of the collapse, identifying Brandon Vance's ill-advised elimination of regulatory oversight as the primary catalyst for the disaster. Board of Directors convened an emergency session that weekend to address the catastrophe. George Vance was stripped of his executive authority and forced into immediate retirement, while Brandon Vance was summarily dismissed from his position without a severance package. Paragon was forced to pay $2,400,000 in settled federal fines and spent millions more attempting to recertify its manufacturing operations. Unable to recover from the reputational damage and financial losses, Paragon's assets were eventually liquidated and sold to regional competitors at a fraction of their former value. The historic steel manufacturing plant that had operated in Pittsburgh for nearly a century was formally dissolved, serving as a tragic monument to executive arrogance and reckless cost-cutting. On Monday afternoon, Dr. Ingrid Weber visited my office above Seamus O'Malley's pub. She offered Miller Compliance Consulting a comprehensive multi-year contract to oversee regulatory compliance auditing across Eisen Metal Group's entire North American industrial network. The engagement provided complete operational autonomy, an annual retainer of $400,000, and an hourly rate of $350 for specialized investigative work. I accepted the contract, expanding my firm to manage large-scale corporate compliance operations. Dr. Weber noted during our meeting that true corporate value is preserved by experienced professionals who understand that statutory compliance is not an optional overhead expense, but the bedrock of industrial stability. Later that week, I received a text message from Brandon Vance asking for a private meeting to discuss industry best practices and potential consulting opportunities. He wrote that he hoped there were no hard feelings regarding the restructuring and claimed he was eager to learn from my extensive background in regulatory governance. I read the message, reflected briefly on the importance of operational accountability, and deleted the request without replying. Brandon had learned that ignoring established protocols carries severe real-world consequences, and that professional reputation cannot be rebuilt through superficial networking. He had spent years treating experienced personnel like temporary friction, only to find himself completely unmarketable when real regulatory scrutiny was applied. 6 months later, Wyatt graduated with honors from Carnegie Mellon University and joined Miller Compliance Consulting as a junior partner. His technical expertise in digital compliance systems complemented my extensive experience in structural engineering and federal regulations. Together, we built one of the most respected compliance consulting firms in the region, helping industrial enterprises establish robust governance frameworks that protected both operational safety and shareholder value. Wyatt's dedication to methodical oversight assured me that the next generation of engineers would respect the fundamental principles of structural and statutory integrity. Over the next 2 years, Miller Compliance Consulting expanded its operations across 8 manufacturing states, recruiting retired military engineers and senior compliance auditors who shared our commitment to rigorous documentation standards. We developed a proprietary compliance tracking system that integrated digital monitoring with mandatory human verification, ensuring that no corporation under our advisory could ever suffer a regulatory handoff failure. Major industrial clients recognized that paying for expert compliance oversight was far more economical than facing sudden statutory enforcement actions. Our firm grew into an industry benchmark for corporate risk management. We regularly published white papers on regulatory risk mitigation and presented case studies at national manufacturing conferences. In every seminar, I emphasized the foundational truth that shortcuts in governance always carry compound interest in liability. Young executives began to realize that innovation without statutory compliance is merely an illusion of progress. As part of our commitment to professional education, Wyatt and I established an endowed scholarship at Carnegie Mellon University for students pursuing dual degrees in industrial engineering and regulatory law. We wanted to ensure that future leaders understood that safety protocols and legal compliance are not operational obstacles, but essential structural supports that protect human lives and corporate integrity. Reflecting on the entire experience while sitting in my new corporate office overlooking the river, I remembered the wisdom Seamus had shared at the pub. True professional success is not achieved through loud declarations or superficial cost-cutting tricks. It is built upon disciplined adherence to standards, quiet preparation, and an unyielding commitment to doing things correctly. Paragon Steel collapsed because its leadership believed experience was an unnecessary expense. In the end, their $102,000 savings cost them $340 million, proving that knowledge and integrity will always prevail over short-sighted arrogance.